The following program is a special presentation of the Big Ten Network, produced in association with the University of Illinois.
The entire world is communicating using light. Laser technology enables us to transmit large amounts of information long distances using less energy. And it is possible because of a scientist at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, Nick Holonyak Jr.
He's like a god, right?
He's created a League of Giants.
We're playing to win. The ability to be interconnected via the internet or your cell phone, etc., anywhere in the world is really enabled by fiber optics that in many ways came from Nick's lab.
You come into things that bear his fingerprints multiple times a day.
Holonyak has had a major scientific breakthrough every decade for the last 60 years. His inventions revolutionized how we talk to each other, how we power electric tools, how we treat disease, how we are entertained, and how we see in the dark.
In my view, LEDs are going to replace every light source there is. There's going to be no more of the conventional light sources with the glass bulb.
I went to a lot of different schools, and some of them were great schools, but none of them had the environment that Illinois has.
Being a student at U of I, it's definitely a fun experience.
There's lots of sports, music, it's a huge campus life.
It has a great reputation and has one of the top engineering schools in the country.
I chose engineering because I wanted to make a difference in the world.
Engineering certainly does have an impact on society in an everyday manner.
We face a lot of problems in our society today, and engineers are at the forefront of dealing with that.
I chose Illinois because I liked that it had an amazing engineering program, but there was also so much else going on.
It's really fun being a student here. There's a huge campus, you can always find something to do.
I'm in the National Society of Black Engineers. We do a lot of outreach to students in the Chicagoland area.
Whatever you're interested in, you can certainly find your niche here at the university.
Really love being a student here.
I think one of our most popular attractions every year at Engineering Open House is the Jerry Sanders Design Competition. It's where a bunch of groups and teams from the University of Illinois, but also from other schools, design and build robots, and then they compete in a series of competitions in a giant arena. And that definitely attracts a lot of kids. They're really excited about the robots. Some of the cool exhibits we have a concrete crusher in Talbot Lab where we apply 3 million pounds of force to a block of concrete until it explodes into 1 million pieces, and all the kids love it. We have our Rube Goldberg team showcasing their machine this year. The theme is Toy Story, and the task is to water a plant. And definitely encourage everyone to check out all the exhibits we have to offer at Engineering Open House. There's over 250 of them, so plenty to keep you busy over both days.
Nick Holonyak Jr. has been recognized by world leaders for his groundbreaking scientific research. He has won the coveted Lemelson Prize and inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. It is a long way from his roots in Southern Illinois. Nick Holonyak Jr. was born in 1928 in Ziegler, Illinois. His father, like most men in town, was a coal miner.
This is sort of the ultimate American success story.
Nick is a real person, doesn't live in an ivory tower.
He has very strong feelings about the roots with his family and with his father and mother in Southern Illinois. You always have the feeling that he remembers and feels those times, and he never takes anything for granted.
Nick Holonyak Sr. came to America in 1909, traveling across the ocean with many of his neighbors from the Carpathian Mountain region of Europe.
I grew up around the coal mining immigrant people, and so I understand broken Slavic almost perfectly. My dad was from the poorest region of Europe, the Carpathian Mountains, and he had $2, and he got off a boat in Baltimore and started walking to Pennsylvania because there were hunky coal miners there. All he knew was, "Mr. Boss, give me job."
he found work in the Ziegler, Illinois coal mine. Miners worked 10 to 12 hours a day and were paid 38 cents per ton of coal mined. In 1914, Holonyak Sr. was starting work in a mine in Royalton, Illinois, when a great explosion ripped through the lower levels. It took the lives of 52 men. But Nick's father miraculously survived by climbing out of an air shaft.
This explosion got 51 or 52, and you think about it, there's no place to keep these bodies. They're digging graves day and night. And he says he's getting sleepy, and a guy throws a shovel full of dirt on him. Oh, wait a minute, you know. Coal company gave him a piece of the cemetery, and when we went there to visit, he would always go in this one corner, and I would always see him outside. So nice, I mean, he's praying for it because half of them were from around him in the old country, in the village where he was from.
How can you be in an environment like that where no one in your family has had an education? You are facing a life of probable, manual labor, unless you have tremendous strength of will.
When I played marbles in Southern Illinois, I played to win. I never bought a marble in my life. My mother sends me with the milk can across town to the farmers to get milk, and I find up on that hill these kids are playing marbles, and I see I can whip them. And I always got some marbles in my pocket, and I'm late coming home. I could hardly walk because my pockets are full. I took away all their marbles.
In 1943, Nick was 14 years old, too young to serve in the military, but not too young to get a job.
I was on my dad's back about going to mine. But he didn't want me down below. He considered anything on top better, safer, easier. And so I came close. I was down in the mine, but I didn't stay in the mine.
So instead, Nick lied about his age and worked for the Illinois Central Railroad as a gandy dancer.
Digging in ties and working with heavy steel and everything else, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, 65 cents an hour. Had a big washout, and for 33 hours we're working, and I thought, the hell with this.
Nick wanted to join the Navy, but he was underage and his father refused to sign the papers. So he looked for another way to leave the literally back-breaking work of the railroad.
And it just didn't seem right to me after high school that there's no more school. It just didn't seem right.
World War II ended, and a large number of veterans returned to Illinois with the GI Bill. There wasn't room for all of them at the University of Illinois Urbana campus, so they opened extension centers in several high schools, including one near Nick in Granite City. Nick saw his chance to go to college and learn more about electronics, an interest he had had since he was a boy.
My godfather had a Model T Ford, and there were a bunch of spark coils in there that were the ignition, and I could hear those things buzzing and so forth, so I'm fascinated by what that Model T is doing and what this electrical stuff is doing and all that, and so that was more intriguing to me.
September of 1947, Nick transferred to Illinois' Urbana campus.
This was an interesting place because I could come from Southern Illinois in the Depression and not know that people lived this well. And this would be a portal to the world, not to a job somewhere and all that. It's not a hunt for a job, it's a hunt for learning.
At Illinois, Holonyak heard from his fellow engineering students about an amazing new invention called the transistor. In 1951, one of the inventors of this device, John Bardeen, joined the faculty at Illinois. Soon after he came to Urbana, Bardeen gave a lecture on the transistor. He used a small plastic box to demonstrate how it worked. He turned it on and played the tune, "How Dry I Am."
He flipped on the switch and the thing was on instantly. And see, everything that we know about in electronics is vacuum tubes. You flip on the switch and you wait for everything to warm up. And boom, that thing is working immediately. And I almost fell out of the chair because I know how to do electronics. I'm already a grad student, I understand this stuff, and nothing works like that. And I know, this is different.
When Holonyak learned that Bardeen was going to set up a semiconductor laboratory at Illinois, he asked to join. Some of his fellow graduate students laughed at the idea.
You're nuts. That's not going anywhere. Well, of course, the joke now is on them.
Holonyak became Bardine's first graduate student in electrical engineering. Bardine became the first person to win 2 Nobel Prizes in physics.
Nick and John's brains seem to work very similarly, and I think that both of these guys are phenomenal empiricists. They're able to look at the world and see deeply into it.
Bardine's transistor replaced bulky vacuum tubes and ushered in the modern era of electronics. In the next decade, his student Nick Holonyak would further advance semiconductor technology and pave the way for a new, efficient light source.
The first question that everybody always asks is, does it float?
Or the people say, I don't think that would work.
We all think of concrete as something that's on the sidewalks, and you don't really think a concrete canoe could really float.
When especially non-engineers hear the word concrete canoe, it seems like an oxymoron.
We broke into 2 separate teams. We had a construction team and we had a mixed team. The construction team was responsible for making the actual mold to actually find out what the shape of the canoe is going to be. And then the mixed team, they would test different mixes, different aggregates and components to make sure that whatever that specific mix was, that it could float.
Sort of like if you're baking a cake, no matter what, you're going to be using flour and sugar. It's just how much flour and how much sugar do you use to get whatever type of cake you're going for.
The mix design is really crucial to make sure that we know that it will actually survive the races.
Every year, one of the requirements is we have to have a theme. This year we decided on cemetery. Our logo has always been a skeleton, which is canoeing because it's the Boneyard Yacht Club. And so we wanted to sort of tie that in because it's the 40th anniversary of concrete canoeing.
University of Illinois and Purdue raced in the first intercollegiate concrete canoe race, and University of Illinois actually won.
The canoeing tradition at U of I starts early. In 1971, Clyde Kessler at the university challenged his class to build a concrete canoe.
Sort of said, concrete is so great we could do anything, even build a canoe out of it.
At the end of the year, they finished the boat, which they called Misled. The successive year, Purdue challenged us to a race.
Purdue's boat capsized in the final race, which led us to win. Now it's become a national competition with 20 schools making it to nationals, but we have 20 different regional competitions.
It's a team sport. You go outside, get exercise. People get very enthusiastic about it.
We all put in our time, and in the end, we come out with what I think is a pretty cool product.
A few years after finishing his PhD at Illinois, Nick Holonyak took a position at General Electric in their semiconductor products department. His fellow scientists were researching how to create light from solid materials. Most research was being done using gallium, arsenic, and phosphorus.
There were people working on direct semiconductors, but they were infrared. It was gallium arsenide. There were people working on indirect semiconductors, gallium phosphide, which were visible, but were indirect and not so efficient. And Nick had the idea of combining those materials together.
Because I knew that I wanted to be where the eye sees. And boy, there was some heavy swearing in the corridors of General Electric that about you so-and-so, if you'd have been a chemist, you'd have known that wouldn't work and all that. Like hell, tell that to the bumblebee, it flies, doesn't it?
Holonyak ignored the talk and made his own crystals. Out burst a ray of red light. It was the first practical, visible spectrum, light-emitting diode.
Most people thought that if you put some of these more complicated materials together, they would just fall apart. And Nick showed that that was not the case if you really did things the right way, and you can make these into viable materials.
On October 9th, 1962, at General Electric, Holonyak demonstrated his light-emitting device, which was smaller than a penny. Within the walls of the company built on Edison's light bulb, Nick had found a completely new way to light the world.
He was interviewed by Reader's Digest and predicted that eventually we would have white LEDs, and predicted also that the LED is fundamentally the ultimate light source.
I don't know when it's going to take over, but I know, it's going to happen.
Nick believed in the future of LEDs because they use less energy and last longer than regular light bulbs. Incandescent bulbs create light by burning off an internal filament. Some of the energy used to make the light is lost in heat, and the bulbs burn out. Many companies also saw the potential of the new light source. One of the leading LED manufacturers at the time was Monsanto in St. Louis. The company ran an ad in the Wall Street Journal predicting there would one day be LED headlights.
Nick being consultant for Monsanto, people saw the ad and thought Nick was behind it, and it was after him complaining, "Nick, you're telling people lies about what LEDs can do."
One person that didn't doubt Nick's belief in LEDs was John Bardeen. He asked Nick to come back to Illinois and continue his research. Nick returned to Urbana in 1963.
In academia, you can shoot for the stars. You don't have to show that it's going to be a product next year.
He gave a seminar shortly after he got to the university talking about his work. And the thing I remember about the seminar, the main thing was he had a little red LED that you could barely see, and he immersed it in a dewar of liquid nitrogen, and it just lit up. You had this burst of red light, and I was like, wow.
Nick set up his lab at Illinois, selecting a small group of students in electrical engineering and physics to work with him.
He could have raised enough money to have a group twice, 3 times that size, but I don't feel like he ever thought he would do justice to the people that he took on. If he expanded the group, he would spend less and less time with each individual.
It was a family. We would have done anything for Nick and would do anything for Nick, and you had the feeling he would do the same thing for you.
I think a lot of professors, you ask them, kind of challenge them a little bit, they get annoyed. And then Nick is different. Nick likes smart students asking tough questions.
He just has a way of getting you involved so that you become inspired.
Constantly educated you as to how to think about problems. How are you going to turn that into something that matters or that you can make a product out of or impact the world?
If you're working on a problem where you're not capable, where you're incompetent, where your judgment is wrong, you're a loser.
Nick not only had a knack for picking the right problems, but he and his students could do more with less.
We tended to try and innovate and make things work out of whatever we happen to have on hand. And I think that's really was a key for doing advanced research, because you could move quickly.
And the students did push each other. There was certainly pressure to perform. It was a small group. We had resources to do what we needed to do, and Nick had high expectations.
The pressure was more, this is exciting, why aren't I there? This is much better than sitting back and watching TV.
It wasn't, I'm the commander, you're the lowly peon. It was, we're in this together, and if there was something to be done, Nick would do it too, if it had to get done. But don't walk away at 6 o'clock at night and think that's the end of the day for you, right? We got an experiment going. The rest of the world is working on these problems too, and they're smart and they're well-funded, and they're going to run you over.
For Nick, time was an enemy. We're a small group. We're out here in the middle of Illinois. We have to beat the 200-person large budget group at Bell Labs, and we can do it.
Nick set a high bar in the lab and at the gym. Many of his students joined in his devotion to daily exercise, but quickly learned they couldn't keep up with their professor.
He could walk across the basketball floor on his hands with his feet up in the air. He could walk up to a rope that they had hanging in the gym and climb it just climb right up without using his legs. I mean, it amazed me.
But it wasn't only his students that were amazed. The scientific world took notice of what was happening in Nick's lab. In 1977, Nick and his students announced they had demonstrated the first quantum well laser. This new type of laser emitted a very concentrated light using minimum power. Its optical signal was as much as 40 times greater than that of other lasers.
And it's amazing, we're excited. Nick's very excited when he heard about that. But we did not realize how important that thing's going to be.
Today, quantum well lasers are used in all high-performance lasers and LEDs, and are what made possible the technology in CD and DVD players. Nick did what he said he would do. He had beaten the large, well-funded research groups, such as Bell Labs, to a major breakthrough. Bell even decided to pay him a visit.
I'm sure they were amazed. In fact, at one point I recall one person saying, well, where's the real laboratory? This must not be the real place. Where do you really do this stuff? Well, this is it.
Every decade, Nick and his students achieved another scientific milestone. Each invention made lasers more practical and more reliable. Today, Nick has a new lab in Illinois' Micro and Nanotechnology Laboratory. But one thing he hasn't changed is his daily coffee hour.
Hey, Nick.
Okay, Russ.
Hey, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Many of his former students make pilgrimages back to his lab to share a cup with Nick.
Partly because Nick's my teacher, colleague, friend, advisor, but I also, in a selfish way, get something back from that because I can tell you, I get more energized out of each visit.
I remember a postdoc always told me, at the coffee hours, make sure you go and just listen and ask him why he thinks this way, why he doesn't tackle this problem from a different angle.
Nick loves to tell stories, and sometimes repeatedly, the same story, but no one ever complained because they were interesting and amusing, and they were sort of the masonry that built up his life.
During the war, they sent, we were the last section.
Even though you've heard it 40 times, there's something new that comes out, or you appreciate a little more what he said to you, and it finally sinks in.
He knows the entire history of the electronics industry. He was there when it first was born. He's been through it, so it's a personal experience. It's not like reading a history book. It's knowing the people, knowing what their thoughts were at the time. That's so inspiring.
It was during one of Nick's coffee hours that he and Professor Milton Fang had an idea about another major invention. In 2004, Fang sat down with Nick to talk about his discovery of the world's fastest transistor.
And Milton's telling me some baloney about his transistors. To be very fast, they have to be very small and they have to have a very high current density. And at first I think he's nuts.
He was puzzled how my transistor did not blow up.
All the copper slabs you got in there, you're trying to get that heat out of there, huh?
The only reason he cannot figure out it didn't blow up must be not heat. It must be light come out of the device.
So then I asked him, Milton, then that means the base current in your device is a big enough current to be a light generator. There ought to be light.
Of course, at that moment, I didn't realize what he's talking about. You ignore him once, you ignore him twice. But if you go to there drinking coffee, Nick never forget about a question. He asked the same question whole week.
He went back and he looked again and he says, you're right, there's light.
Holy mackerel.
They had discovered the transistor laser. For the first time, a device operated simultaneously as a transistor and a laser. It could output electricity and light. The transistor laser could greatly increase the speed of signal processing and revolutionize supercomputing and broadband communications. Nick's inventions are not his only legacy. He also created a league of giants in the world of lasers and LEDs.
I came to Illinois because I know there's a great academic recognition here.
I wanted a career and a good educational foundation to be able to really do anything.
Being a student at Illinois gave me opportunities to take a wide variety of courses.
They're taught by top-notch professors who are the best minds in their field.
It is a big university, but the community is great.
Well, the University of Illinois is known for having one of the top engineering institutions in the nation.
I thought that engineering was a great place to start and that I could do a lot with it.
You could go into consulting, you could go into design, you could go into manufacturing.
We're going to get a degree that really sets us apart and gives us a competitive advantage over our peers.
Another great thing about this university is you can join a lot of groups.
The student programming at Illinois allows students to get involved in a lot of different things.
From club soccer to engineering clubs to volunteer opportunities throughout the campus.
There's always something to do, it's always fun, it's never dull.
I think one of our most popular attractions every year at Engineering Open House is the Jerry Sanders Design Competition. It's where a bunch of groups and teams from the University of Illinois, but also from other schools, design and build robots, and then they compete in a series of competitions in a giant arena, and that definitely attracts a lot of kids. They're really excited about the robots. Some of the cool exhibits we have a concrete crusher in Talbot Lab where we apply 3 million pounds of force to a block of concrete until it explodes into 1 million pieces, and all the kids love it. We have our Rube Goldberg team showcasing their machine this year. The theme is Toy Story, and the task is to water a plant. And definitely encourage everyone to check out all the exhibits we have to offer at Engineering Open House. There's over 250 of them, so plenty to keep you busy over both days.
Nick Holonyak Jr. has not only achieved a major scientific breakthrough every decade for the last 60 years, he advised over 60 doctoral students at the University of Illinois. George Crawford worked in Nick's lab in the 1960s, while he earned a PhD in physics at Illinois. He then worked with a team at Monsanto to create the first amber and yellow LEDs. Today, Crawford and several of Nick's former students work at Philips Lumileds, which produces a full spectrum of LEDs, including the latest, white. It is possible that in the next 10 years, all of our lighting will be LEDs. Another one of Nick's former students, Don Cyphers, helped develop a way to magnify laser signals that became a key component in telephone and internet communications.
One of the biggest inspirations he's given me was there are a lot of people in this world who are competing with you. You need to be very competitive. Need to get there very fast.
And there is no such thing as nobody gets left behind. You damn well believe that the world leaves you behind. It does. It treats, we are all so different that we all have to work as fast and as hard as we can. And you do, because why would you waste your life?
While Nick was quietly changing the world, his wife Kay has stood by his side. Kay pursued a very successful nursing career over their 50-year marriage.
He could not do what he has done throughout his life and his career without her being the rock that she is in their relationship and in their life.
There are few scientists, such as Nick Holonyak Jr., who have contributed major scientific advancements for over 60 years. And most people that know him will say the key to his success is doing things the Nick way.
The Nick way is an attitude and an inspiration.
He has a phrase he likes to use, the world of ideas. And it's really important to him to spend his day in the world of ideas.
He said, life is about improving the world, and people that don't have that as a goal, I don't know what they live for. That's kind of Nick's philosophy. He wants to improve things, he wants to learn things. It's exciting to see him continue today, even today, to have that philosophy and that energy.
I think it matters that when you're able to do something, do it. We are all lucky. We are all lucky that we exist in the first place. But actually, I'm lucky because what could I change it and have a more interesting life? I couldn't. No way.
The preceding program was produced by the University of Illinois in association with the Big Ten Network.